Hello, YouTube. This is it. The time has finally come. We are going to finish off Lord of the Rings month. 2 months late. Yeah, sorry for that. Things kept on getting in the way. School, laziness, I guess. But finally, we can finish this. I can finally rid myself of this evil looming over me. Let's get into it. So for the story aspect of this, I'm going to do something a bit different. Actually not a bit, very different than what I normally do, which is get down to the bare bones of this story. Now, some of you might be asking why. The reason is because I've already summed up this story. I have summed it up in two other reviews, that being Fellowship of the Ring and Two Towers. Those those movies pretty much Two Towers, where that movie ended off, is pretty much where this one does too, so yeah, I'm not going to go into unnecessary detail about this. It would just be really useless because I've already done that, and if you want to hear my more in-depth thoughts about it, then just go watch those two reviews. I'm sure that they're somewhere in the videos like this one section, so um, but if you don't want to waste those, if you don't want to spend those 2 hours watching it, here's the bare bones of the story, and which is there's a magic ring that needs to go and be destroyed, so a young hobbit named Frodo is now given this ring to bear, but he needs some assistance, so a fellowship is formed, consisting of Sam, who joined just because he was outside of a window. Yeah, he doesn't really serve a role in this. It's just he was outside the window. At least in the other, at least in the Peter Jackson movies, we could see that there was like a reason as to why he actually tagged along. But here, I'll talk about it later. I will save him for later. But then after him, we also got Gandalf, who's the wise old wizard. Aragorn, who is a king and ranger. Um, Legolas, an elf, um, and Gimli, a dwarf, with Boldemir, who, yeah, we've all seen the Peter Jackson one. We already know what's gonna happen. But yeah, he's another warrior. They really needed four of those. Um, yeah, again, yeah, the reason for making a small fellowship is so then they can be not really seen, but then they get in like all these warriors because they expect a fight. Am I the only one who finds that ironic? But it's like they almost knew that this was gonna happen. Like we know we're gonna get into a war, or we have to get into a war, right? I mean, come on. With what we're doing, we're gonna get into a war. Um, and there's also Merry and Pippin who are there for reasons. So this fellowship is formed, but it is unfortunately divided, and by the supposed death of Gandalf and the actual death of Boldemir. But eventually, so now the group has now been divided, and Merry and Pippin, yeah, I don't know why I tried them first, but they go off to do an epic task. Get captured and then meet up with a tree. And that's it. Yep. They don't. Yeah, Treebeard doesn't help out in this version. He just sort of walks around. Awesome. Aragorn. Aragon. Um, dang it, Legolas, Gimli, and Gandalf. They eventually meet up again. Yes, they do meet up with Gandalf. and they get involved in more of the battle side of Lord of the Rings, as Sam and Frodo go off to go destroy the ring. And that's pretty much the very bare bone of this movie. And I mean very, very summed up. There are 2 hours and 15 minutes of this movie. So let's just say that 4 minutes of summing that up, that is the bare bone. In fact, that's hardly the bone. That's the bare twig of this movie. But hey, it's less detailed than the Peter Jackson series combined, so I guess it has that going for it. But really, this movie doesn't really offer that much in its story basics because mainly the whole entire time while watching this, it's almost impossible to not compare it to the Peter Jackson movies. And that's pretty much what the story part is going to be about, the comparison. But we'll be talking about the story itself at the end. So the comparison pretty much here are there are tiny things and then there are really big things. Now, I know this is the most obvious detail. Everyone noticed this one. This one cannot be forgotten. Frodo has the ring on a rope this time instead of a chain. Yep, big difference there. Um, yeah, I know. That's why I changed this to a rope if anyone was wondering that. But yeah, that's a huge difference there. Another difference is how it looks when Frodo actually does put the ring on, in which it looks so much better. Oh my gosh, why didn't the Peter Jackson movie take notes on this version? This version makes it look so interesting. It looks like you're going into the other world from Silent Hill or something. All the colors have been slightly distorted, everything's slowed down, and you can't even see any of the other people. You only see people that actually live in this realm. It really feels like you've entered another dimension, and that seems to be the point, and it just looks really cool. Where in the other version, it it looked like Smudge Tool. Yay! That one was so amazing, wasn't it? But yeah, this version definitely made it look a whole lot better. And that was something I meant to talk about in the animated part, but I guess I'll talk about it a little bit there. Um, and also in the Battle of Helm's Deep, this, yeah, there, the only real difference is that, the King Theorn does actually want to participate in the battle a little bit more, and he's actually making his big speech of, like, we can do this, and if we don't, then we died fighting, and we died doing something honorable first. He didn't make any other speech after that. Unlike the Peter Jackson version, which I am going back and forth as to whether or not this is a good idea, because that's always the interesting thing to do. Um, at least this king knows what he's doing. At least he knows where his priorities are and everything. So now, so pretty much in that bit, the only other difference in the Battle of Helm's Deep is the color palette, which in this version it's red, and in the Peter Jackson films it was blue. Not a major difference, but it does feel much more impacting in red. It feels like more blood has been shed and everything. So I don't know. Maybe I'm the only one to see that. Another difference is Sauron, who is not in this movie. Yeah. He's pretty much not even here. He doesn't even get a line. All we see is him in the beginning, and that's really it. Like, where in the Peter Jackson movie we see him so much. Here they decide to tell and not show him. So just sort of the show. just sort of the don't show but tell sort of method, and that makes a real impact. You really do feel like a big eeriness whenever his name is even brought up. But outside of them, outside of those differences, there's really only one left. Okay, well, two left. And this part is the one that really annoys me. Okay, so you know how in the Peter Jackson movies, where after Frodo was given the ring by Bilbo, Gandalf would leave for a few days, maybe a week, a year at worst, it seemed to be, but, guess what he does in this version? He leaves for 17 years. Okay, and then, oh, and guess what's amazing about this? When he gets back, when he throws the ring into the fire, he is surprised that Frodo is actually tempted by it. Are you serious? You're surprised Frodo was tempted by the ring after 17 years of leaving him alone with the thing? The Frodo in the Peter Jackson movies, he couldn't wait for a year. This one is just like, oh, 17 years? That's like a day. Come on, man. What are you doing being tempted by it? And, oh yeah, and then after that, he leaves again to go find out about the ring some more. What was he doing those 17 years? Was he just like, oh look, a book! A really long book! I might as well read the whole dictionary while I'm out here. Like, really, what was he doing? I really don't get that. Like, okay, he had a longer time span in between The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings movies, but dear God, what was he doing those 17 years? Really? What was he doing? And they don't really answer this. They just sort of say, 17 years have passed and we should just be fine with that. No, I'm not fine with that. That needs some explanation. Why did you leave him for 17 years? What was he doing in that time? Can I find out? Nope, they never say, so I guess I'm not supposed to care about it. As you can tell, it's not working. But, then we have probably the biggest difference with this movie and the Peter Jackson ones is its time. In that it can't spend that much. Yeah, this movie, for like the first 20 minutes, is really rushed. Like, they're pretty much saying, there's this evil ring. Guess what it can do? It can turn you invisible. That's all you need to know. Bye! That's, like, pretty much the whole thing. That's it. That is honestly, like, the whole entire thing in this opening. They're just like, oh yeah, Bilbo had this ring at one point. Now he doesn't because he gave it to Frodo. There's also this wizard named Gandalf. Oh yes, and did we tell you about what this ring does? It turns you invisible. Oh yes, and there's also Merry and Pippin. They joined this group randomly. Oh, and there's also Aragorn. There's also Gimli. There's also Legolas. There's also this giant elf city which we're not going to visit anymore. Then that's pretty much it all. Bye! Really, what is that? Like, that's really the first 20 minutes of this movie. It feels so rushed. And, I mean, like, after the first 20 minutes, then it really does slow down a whole lot more. And thank goodness for that, but, wow! First 20 minutes, and it's just like, nope, you don't need to know anything. All you need to know is this is a ring, it's evil. That's it. Even Merry and Pippin's introduction is kind of glanced over. Guess how they're introduced? Like, in the Peter Jackson movie, they spent time to sort of establish them beforehand, right? Here, they're cousins of either Frodo or Sam's. I don't really know. I think it was Sam's. And Frodo and Sam stop by their house, and then they just decide to tag along. That's really how they explain this. Yeah, they explain it just like that. They're just like, they decide to tag along. Bye, that's all you need to know. So, the opening is very, very distracting from the rest of the movie, but, outside the compare, but I guess that does make sense. I mean, they did only have 2 hours and 15 minutes to actually get across the first two stories of Lord of the Rings, which took 6 hours for another guy to do. And even then, in his version, it feels a little bit sped up at times. So, yeah, I can't fault them for that. I mean, they really did try. They tried really hard to make it feel like, okay, we're gonna take our time a little, but it just doesn't work, and I'm not blaming them for this. It's just the time and the type of story that they're trying to tell. But for the movie on its own, for its story, it's actually pretty good. It does touch all of the parts that it needs to touch. All the stuff that it needs to address is addressed, no matter how fastly it might seem, and it does definitely cool down its pacing every once after the first 20 minutes, and they even spend like 5 minutes with him with the ring on, which could just been done if they were just keeping normal speed. It could just been like a minute. So I do think that they do slow down and that they do realize, okay, we went a little bit too fast there. Let's try and calm down for a little bit after this. And they definitely do use that to their advantage once they do get to use it. So for the story, I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10. There were definitely some problems in this, especially in how sped up it is, but outside of that, it does tell what it needs to say pretty good. So, yeah, 6 out of 10. Now on to the characters. Okay, so since this movie sums up pretty much the first two movies of Lord of the Rings, there are a lot of characters to talk about. Now, I've already talked about Sauron, so I'm not gonna talk about him again just to cut time. And also because, well, I've already described him, that would just be too repetitive. So, let's start off with talking about Frodo. And, oh my gosh! Wow, okay, so Frodo was awesome in this. Um, now now if you see my other reviews on this character, like if you see my Fellowship review, then you already know I'm not a big fan of Elijah Wood's portrayal of him. Not to say it's the acting or anything. I think it's both. Like it's just the acting and the writing. And his acting is very good at times. It's just he felt like a wimp to me. Like, I never really saw a character that I thought could handle the will of the ring. So, yeah. I was kind of expecting to get the same sort of thing from here, but actually, he really is a freaking strong character, and he still has that goodness in him. He still has that, he wants to do the right thing. He's still a good person. You can still see that in him. So it's not like he's just tough or anything, and that's all. No. But you can also see the corruption with the ring as it sort of happens. It doesn't happen as much, though. That's kind of my only problem. Like, we never see that scene with Frodo holding, Sam at sword points. Yeah, we never see that, which I was kind of disappointed by. I kind of did actually really want to see that in animated form, but alas, it wasn't there. But, he definitely makes up for it because he actually uses his sword. He actually remembers the pointy end goes into your opponent. He actually remembers that. Where the other Frodo, I think, forgot what a sword does. Here he actually fights. He manages to intimidate the Ringgraves, even when he's injured, he still managed to fight. He still manages to fight. So I will say this one is definitely much stronger, and this is definitely one that I can see as a guy who's actually bearing the ring. But then after him is Sam, who just uh yeah uh what okay why did we cut to that okay yeah, what is there to say about Sam Wise in this version? I find myself asking a lot of questions. What did they do to him? Why did they do this to him? Why is he looking like that? Why does he act the way that he does? Why is he so annoying? Why are most of his characteristics, aside from loyalty, taken away from the Peter Jackson movie? And finally, what went wrong? How about the first time that we see him? Yeah, that's a good place to start. That's a good spot to look into when we look at what went wrong. Really, what in the world were they doing? Sam went from being my favorite character in the Peter Jackson movies to, in this version at least, to me just asking, what in the world did they do to him? Really, what did they do? I really want to find this out, yet I can't find any answers. So I guess I'm just gonna have to deal with that, but really, what in the world is that? So, after him, we then get Gandalf, who I can't really decide which version I like more. I can't tell if I like this version more or the Peter Jackson one. They're both pretty good, and they're both very similar. Like, here, I will say though, his only real difference is that we can see his age more. We can see him sort of being a little bit more angry about things and just sort of acting a little bit older. Um, like time's catching up with him and he doesn't really like that. He's trying to fight off the Grim Reaper at times, and that's actually kind of likable. I do like seeing a little bit more to him than that, because like they do add a little bit more to him. But then again, that wise aspect is kind of taken away a little bit. So I guess it depends as to what type of Gandalf you actually want. I mean, that wise version is still there. It's just not there as much. And he acts more older at a lot more often. So it depends as to what kind of version that you want out of him. Frankly, I do like the Peter Jackson one better, but it is a very close call. So then we have Aragorn, voiced by John Hurt. Why do I bring up his voice actor? Because it's the only one that I recognize. And really, I don't recognize him from that great a product. I recognize him from The Black Cauldron. But hey, he's awesome in that. But and he does really well here too. He sounds the part. He really does sound the part. But outside of his acting, outside of the actor, what else is there to him? Actually, a lot more. Yeah, we can actually see him being more kingly in this one, which it does take a whole lot longer to get to in the Peter Jackson version. Here, he's already like that. He already has responsibility and weight on him. You already feel that he is sort of a king. Even though technically he was never made a king in this one, he's really just a ranger, but still, he does at least act like a king and a ranger at both times. So that's a pretty interesting way of looking at him. And I do like how they brought it up more. Then after him, we have the incredibly important characters, Merry and Pippin. They're okay. Yeah, that's pretty much it. They're just okay. Um, there are they don't really seem to have any identifiable personality. And there were actually a lot of times where I was just like, wait, which one's Mary and which one's Pippin? Is the one with the darker hair Pippin? Is the one with the lighter hair Mary? I don't know which one is which. They both look the same except for hair color. How, they act the same. How am I supposed to identify them? And that's probably their biggest problem is that they both act kind of like they're in unison about everything. Like, it's sort of like a hive mind. Like, they both act the exact same. And that's a pretty big issue because they don't really get any character from that. Like, give the Peter Jackson one some credit. Their character might not have been the best, but they at least had identifiable characters. Here, they're good friends. That's about it. There's nothing really else to them, and they don't really get any development outside of that. Unlike the Peter Jackson ones, but then again, they did have 9 hours. So, yeah, like I said, that takes a major toll on them. And then we got Legolas, acts, who really looks like a teenager to me. Am I the only one who sees this? He looks like a teenager. And he needs to get a haircut. Not as much as the Peter Jackson one, but still. He just looks like some weird hippie teenager to me for some reason. But, he's alright. Yeah, him and Gimli are alright. They can be put into that category. There's not really that much to them, if anything. They'll be lucky to get a line. They just kind of fade off into the background. But speaking of the elves, guess who's actually not here? Arwen! She's gone! Thank you. Oh my gosh, thank goodness. If you see my other reviews, you know I hate her. And thank God they cut her out of this one. And just made me see how pointless she was in the other movies. But, and so yay, she's not here. Speaking of, and now another character that kind of annoyed me, Gadriel. And here, she's okay. She's alright too. There are a lot of characters that can be classified as okay. Particularly because they don't get that much development or even screen time. So we don't really get to know that much about them, but for what they do, it's fine. And Gadriel, that's pretty much how I can sum her up. She's just okay. There's not really much to her, and she's hardly even in there. In which is good. I mean, I'm glad they don't take like a 10-minute detour for her. But then again, you still wonder what in the world she's doing in the woods, why'd she go out into the woods, what's her connection to everything going on. Yeah, we don't find out in this version, it's just sort of, she has magic, that's all we need to know. She doesn't use that weird power that she had in the other movie. I really don't know what that power was, like when she's talking about getting the ring and everything. Yeah, she doesn't do anything there, she's just sort of there. So, yeah, nothing big happens with her powers or anything. We hardly even see her powers in use. Um, and then after her, we get on to a fine character, Gollum. And this is where I really gotta say Peter Jackson hit it out of the park. Because here his backstory is shown as the very first scene in this movie, so we already know his past. Which I guess from some standpoint is good, but then again, hearing about him all throughout Fellowship is what kind of makes you wonder, what's he gonna be like? Here we just kind of look at it and say, well, that's what he's gonna be like. He's gonna be a guy who was corrupted, so we kind of already know what to expect. so I guess, and they do play around with the split personality a tad, but they don't really mess around with it as much as they did in Peter Jackson's, which is really what made him a more interesting character. So without playing around with that, they kind of suffer for it. Um, then we have Theorn. Um, he's there. That's pretty much his whole role. Yeah, he's just sort of there. He's a king. He has political ties. That's all, and he's a fighter. That's all we get of him, really. Oh, and his daughter, niece, whatever the heck that means. Yeah, she's a mute. She doesn't even get a line. She just kind of gets cut to, and then they're just like, okay, well, you got her whole story there, didn't you? So yeah, not really much to say about her. Then we have Saruman, and I, I have nothing to say about him really. It's just a few things about how he acts. One, he acts much more silly to me in this version. Also, his castle. How did no one see he would be evil with this thing? He lives in a giant fortress of doom. At least in the other one, it was bright and everything. But here, it's just like covered in red. How? It has like a red sky and everything. How does no one notice this? Like, oh yeah, he looks like Mr. Normal with that giant red house over there. Like that blood red house that has a darkened area and has like no living plants around it and looks like a giant fortress of doom. He looks like Mr. Normal. And he seems very trustworthy. Um, and also his clothes. Yeah, everyone calls him Sauron the White. Sauron the White. Here, I don't really understand why. I always kind of thought they would name like these sort of wizards after the clothes they wore, like Gandalf the Grey. When his clothes changed, he was Gandalf the White. But here, Saruman's wearing purple and red. Should he be called Saruman the Purple and Red? I mean, really, why is he wearing that? It doesn't add into anything. It's just, why is he wearing that? I don't get it. But aside that, yeah, and he's kind of funny here with some of his reactions, but outside that, there's not much. There's Bilbo, who, yes, I have actually found out he is indeed Frodo's uncle. He really looks a little bit older than that, but okay. Um, so yeah, mystery solved. Now I know. Um, and yeah, we don't really get to see that much of him, but we do kind of see how he is trying to get past the ring and how he's trying to just enjoy his life, and that's kind of nice to see him do. We don't really see much of the corruption with the ring, and whenever it does occur, he does take notice of it and will be like, yeah, okay, we need to get rid of this thing. So yeah, that's pretty good. And then there's the final, most important character, Treebeard, as all he does is walk through the woods. He's so important. Yeah, all he really does is walk through the woods. That's about it. That's his whole entire earth-shattering character as he walks through the woods. Exciting, I guess. Um, and so for the characters here, I'm gonna have to give them a 5 out of 10. There are some that are really well done, and I really do like how they are and how they act and everything. Like Frodo especially, I do like how he's treated here, but there are others like Sam. Yeah, I'm not gonna show that photo again. You don't need the nightmares. But yeah, that's Sam and Merry and Pippin, whose development there seems to be lacking. So, yeah, 5 out of 10 because they just sort of made the characters okay, but that probably is due to the fact that they didn't have that long to actually explore them. So, I do give them some credit for that, but a little bit more detail into them would have been nice. Like, maybe cut that ring scene a little bit shorter, like maybe down to 3 minutes, then we could at least explore their characters a bit more, but for what they did it fine. Like, they did what they could in the amount of time that they had, and they do it well enough for me to at least be able to know who's who. Most of the time, I still can't tell which one's Merry and Pippin. So, let's go into the animation. Okay, so now we get down to the animation, and yeah, I've already talked about what it looks like when he puts on the ring, and also how the color palette looks in, where was it, Helm's Deep's battle. So, there's not really much to talk about in this part. It's pretty much just how does it look, and it looks pretty well. The animation is very detailed, and it does look very neat, and it looks like it's very polished up, but for some odd reason, now I don't know if this is just on my version. Now, I'm only saying this because I was watching this online, so that might have been the problem here, but in my version, the lip syncing wasn't done that well. I don't know, maybe they put a little bit too much detail into the animation, so they didn't really have that much time to put that much lip syncing work that well done, but or maybe it was just my computer because my computer is incredibly slow. I don't know. It could have been either one. But yeah, that's just a little thing I wanted to bring up because if that is a thing with this movie itself, then that is kind of an issue for it. But outside of that, the animation looks very good. It looks very detailed. They do have a certain thickness to the lines and everything, so it looks very neat. It definitely has its own style to it. So it's sort of one that only Ralph Bakshi could bring. So yeah, I mean, for what he did, it looks really good. I can definitely see how this was that the animation was a very big part of what made this movie take so long to be made. So for the animation, I'm going to be giving it an 8 out of 10 because it does look very beautiful. It looks very good. It's very detailed. And yeah, again, it's just its own style. It's sort of its own thing with how it looks. Um, so for this movie itself, it's pretty good. I mean, there are some problems with it, like it doesn't really take its time as much as it should, and yeah, that's a major issue. And the timing and the time that the movie goes on is also an issue because it just really feels like they didn't have enough time to tell all they wanted to say. It sort of it sort of ends off just like, really, that's it? Nothing else there, just that's it. They won Helm's Deepest battle, and then they just sort of say, yeah, then they got the ring into the fire and everything was okay. The end. So yeah, I guess they kind of got that terrible pacing from the beginning back again at the very end. So for this movie itself, I'm going to be giving it a 5 out of 10. It's pretty good, and if you want to see a different adaptation of the Lord of the Rings story, then this is definitely a good one to check out. To me, though, it should have been split up into at least 2 parts, but and that's just my opinion, and I guess that they did what they could do with it, and they did make something very unique. So, yeah, I just think that looks kind of neat. And there are definitely some things that they could have done to improve it, but for what it is, it's pretty good. It's a very fun movie, but we don't really get to see the corruption of the ring, and some of the characters do not get their full development that they deserve, and some of them aren't even there. So, yeah, it's just sort of a which version do you prefer sort of thing. In which, yeah, I do prefer the Peter Jackson ones, but this one's definitely a pretty good one. So that's pretty much it. Bye. And now to list my favorite Lord of the Rings movies in order. First one, Two Towers. Second one, Return of the King. The third, Ralph Bakshi. And the fourth, Fellowship. Yeah, there's no real reason for this. I just wanted to bring up my favorites. Bye. So that's pretty much it. And next week, we are going to be looking at Sky High. Yeah, and if you guys don't get why I just had three endings, go watch Return of the King again. Bye.